So hello and welcome to this next webinar by the Professional Development Virtual Chapter from PASS. So welcome to all those who have now joined, and I'm sure we're having a few more join us over the next few minutes for this session that we're going to have by Edwin on the myth and work-life balance. So before I do that, I'm just going to quickly give you a few updates from PASS around the virtual chapter events, etc. So let me just bring my slide deck up. You probably see it says PASS Community News, May 2015. So if I move that forward, basically we want to make sure that for those who are wanting to vote in the next election, which is going to be soon, we need to have a completed, updated My PASS profile by the 1st of June or the end of that day on your profile. So if you just go in and make sure that that has that indicator to say that you're eligible to vote, and it takes you a couple of seconds and you will be able to then vote when that election round comes round. That's for the nomination committee and also the PASS election that will be following that shortly. More information about the SQL PASS elections, you can go to sqlpass.org/elections, and there'll be some information about the times, the dates, etc. of when all this is happening. Move forward to the next one. So for those also who are considering going to the summit this year and have not already purchased a ticket for that, we will be having that in October of this year. So the dates you can see up on the screen, and that's going to be the 27th to the 30th. And I think there's a couple of maybe days of pre-cons that might start before that. I need to go and check. Basically, we're going to have over 5,000 registrations again this year across SQL Server and business intelligence professionals. And again, we're going to have some of the top speakers in the world of presenters, bringing you over 190 technical sessions. There is a discounted code worth $150 off the current price if you use the VC15MDD6, which is the virtual chapter code for the professional development. So if you want to put that in, that gives you $150 off the price, and that will bring that down to about $1,645 currently, and that's until July the 12th. As you're aware, we're one of the professional development virtual chapters, and there's a whole host of them there for you to sign up for. So not only this virtual chapter, but all the others that are running, and we've got some dates. But if you go to the PASS website, you'll be able to see all of those virtual chapter events that are being run, and there's something literally every day. So feel free to kind of go and have a look and sign up for the ones that are of interest to yourself. So here's a quick kind of summary of some of the next virtual chapter meetings. Obviously the 9th and the 12th have already gone, but we got the one that's being held today by ourselves. We've also got a couple of others that are running around PowerShell, in-memory, and data architecture later in the month. So those will be great events as well to also sign up for if you're interested in those topics. And you may be aware that some news around 24 hours of PASS will be coming out in the connector soon. So keep your eyes peeled for news around the new speakers in our industry that will be featured in 24 hours of PASS coming soon. Of course, it would be amiss if I didn't mention SQL Saturdays, kind of one of the most popular sessions that are kind of being run these days. So here's some North American sessions that are being run during May, and also the international ones. Myself, I'll be in the Lisbon event in a couple of days. I'm really looking forward to going back and seeing Lisbon again and presenting at that session. But there's also some around the world in Shanghai, and Kiev, etc. And if you want to know more, SQLSaturday.com is your location to go to. Brand new website recently published that has lots of information about the events and all the sessions that they're doing. So please do that. And some previous recordings and decks you can download from previous events are also available through that channel as well. If you are interested in becoming a volunteer for PASS, then we do have a new website fairly recently put forward, which you can go to volunteer.sqlpass.org, sign up and kind of let them know about your volunteering kind of interest, and they will then be able to kind of put you in touch with the local volunteer groups volunteering for local groups and how that can help. Also, if you're interested in maybe getting in touch with some of the virtual chapter members, again, please do that. If you need some help with that, feel free to contact myself. I will definitely help you, put you in touch with the right people as well. So that's a great opportunity if you want to get involved with that. And just a final kind of a couple of links here. So we have a LinkedIn page, Facebook, Twitter, of course, and you can go to the website. Do make sure you kind of visit that from time to time, because there's lots of information that we do put on there, and there's links to kind of the videos from previous events, etc., that you may kind of not even aware are available to you as a past member. So I've kind of ended my kind of updates from past. What I'm going to do now is introduce our speaker for the evening, and basically then pass over the controls to him. So Edwin is going to do his session on the work-life balance myth, and I'm going to now kind of quickly change presenter and introduce Edwin to introduce himself to you guys.
Perfect. I hope you guys can hear me. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I don't know exactly where you guys are, but it's a privilege for me to be a part of a professional development virtual chapter. I know I've been asking these guys to get me on board, get me on board. It's been a while. I love doing professional development. And just to give you a quick background of myself, my name is Edwin Sarmiento. I'm a SQL Server MVP and Microsoft Certified Master based up here in Canada. So it's basically lunchtime in my time zone. I blog on edwinmsarmiento.com. If you have any questions during or even after the session, feel free to use the chat window on the controls. Ask your questions on Twitter as well, or share your insights on Twitter as well. Just to give you a bit of a background, I've been speaking at the Global PASS Summit since 2007, and most people are not even aware of the fact that I've almost always did professional development for the Global PASS Summit, and there's a reason for that. Number one, I've wanted, and it has been a personal goal for me to constantly improve myself, more like a professional and personal development. But on top of that, I've always seen ID professionals be more concerned about their technical skills, their expertise in attending training and growing their career and their profession. But on the flip side, it's kind of ironic because they keep growing in the area of their expertise without really understanding that there is a portion of what they do for work that impacts how they do things, and that's the personal development side of things. In fact, my closet is filled with books that have nothing to do with SQL Server, but I still do high availability and disaster recovery on the side. But that's what I love to do, and that's what I'm here for. Now, I came up with a controversial title of dealing with the myth of work-life balance, primarily because it's something that I've discovered a couple of years ago when I was still in Singapore and trying to figure out why is it, and try to answer the question, why is it that ID professionals in general, whether you're a developer, DBA, a sysadmin, a network engineer, storage engineer, whatever, has fallen into the trap of working longer hours and burning the midnight oil. And let me start off with a quote that I use in most of my PowerShell presentations, because I've done PowerShell presentations in the past as well. And let me start with this. No DBA or sysadmin or ID professional or anyone for that matter, whether you're in the IT industry or somewhere else, no one ever said something like this on their deathbeds. I wish I had spent more time with my database servers. And every time I say this and every time I show this slide, which has evolved throughout the years, and when I do that in my presentations, people laugh and probably chuckle at the idea that, well, we're poking fun of the idea that, hey, nobody actually likes to spend more time with their database servers or their work even. But the reality is there's always something. There's always an incident. There's always a problem that needs to get solved, which ends up forcing us to spend more time with our work. Not necessarily our database servers, but in most cases, our work. Back in 2007, when I was still in Singapore, I started hearing stories of people dying. The news clip on your upper right-hand corner talks about a project manager, if I'm not mistaken, this was back in 2007, project manager who died on her desk. I mean, think about it. I'd rather die in my bed, but not on my work desk. And the one on your upper left-hand corner is another incident sometime about 2 years ago about somebody who just got overworked and died of a heart attack. He was 24 years old. It's, sometimes we feel, that this is becoming a fact. This is becoming more of a situation in our personal lives. And sometimes we go, nah, it's not going to happen to me. I'm fit, I'm fine. It's just news. People from the other side of the globe, maybe they're experiencing something like this. Maybe they're worked to death. There are some situations and even stories and news information about people working in the manufacturing industry that are OEMs for Apple. And I'm not here to bash these companies or say something against these companies, because these are the very companies and organizations that provide us with a means to make a living. But then it hits home, and that's where things start to sink in. In fact, as I was preparing this particular presentation, I'm a bit of becoming more emotional because of the fact that a couple of months ago, when I was at a big data event here in Microsoft Canada, one of the SQL Server MVPs that I've been working with for a while, we hang out, we tell stories. And what's really striking is when he broke the news, the guy that we've been working with in Microsoft just died, and I didn't know. I know the guy. It's kind of ironic because even though we live a couple miles and kilometers apart, we only get to see each other at global events, and then hearing that he just passed away, sometimes it's devastating. Even when you hear stories about your friends and family members, and that's when it hits home. And the sad reality is we're tied into this notion of, let's do the work, let's pour out as much as we can, roll out that project, make sure that we're doing the production cutover well. But when it really hits home and when it really strikes our innermost being, that's when we start to pause and think about, well, is there really such a thing as a work-life balance? And that's the whole gist and the whole premise of why I came up with the idea of this presentation. As I mentioned, I've learned about this a couple of years ago when I myself was stuck in a situation where, does it really make sense? And is there really such a thing as work-life balance? Because the reality is, whether you're doing an 8-hour job, you're in your work 9 to 5, or whether you have the flexibility of working from home, you're always struggling with constantly working longer hours. Maybe you need to get hold of the pager because you're an operations DBA and you need to be aware of what's happening in your systems. Or maybe you're a project manager that needs to get that project going. Or maybe you're the DBA who needs to deploy new patches on a weekend because that's where your maintenance windows are scheduled. But then we have this constant struggle of, there's really not enough time in the day to get things done. And then there's the desire to spend more time, not just more time, but meaningful time with our families. it's you know, people might be in different stages in their lives. Maybe they're, you know, they're single, they don't have a family to deal with, or maybe they're married with toddlers, or maybe they're in a stage of their lives where, you know, they're about to retire. But then we want to spend meaningful time, and not just with our family, but people that matter to us. It's a constant struggle. And then when we struggle to maintain a healthy lifestyle, I mean, come to think of it, as IT professionals, well, we spend most of our time sitting down on our desks and not doing most of it. Well, you can't think of it. Your fingers are constantly exercising. You're using both of your hands and typing on your keyboard, but that's not what I call a healthy lifestyle. It's when you're, you know, you constantly have to maintain an active lifestyle just because you want to maintain it. And the struggle to maintain a spiritual lifestyle, and spiritual does not necessarily mean religious. I mean, you know, we all have different spiritual backgrounds, but, you know, take that thing aside for a moment, and just struggling to maintain a spiritual lifestyle where you're taking a step back and just meditating and thinking about the things that happened to you, that's an exercise in itself. And so at the end of the day and at the end of the week, and maybe you're thinking, well, I'm overworked, spent 60 hours this week working, trying to meet deadlines, trying to meet all of the requirements, trying to stay ahead of the curve, learning new things. Of course, in the IT industry, where, you know, constant changes are happening. SQL 2016 was introduced last week. You know, we wonder if there's real, true meaning in what we do. I'm pretty sure at some point in your life you've probably asked that question yourself. And may I propose, and that's where the title of this whole presentation came about, is the myth of the work-life balance. Let me propose that there is no such thing as work-life balance. Now, I know a lot of people don't agree with that because, well, where did it actually come from? The idea of work-life balance came from the Industrial Revolution, when people had to go to factories, people had to go to their workplaces, spend 8 hours working, and then come home, sit down, watch TV, maybe spend some time with their family. And the concept of work-life balance started off during this period when we had to go to work, versus the years prior or the generation prior, where they don't have to go to factories, they don't have to go to the office. And so let me reiterate the fact that you can't really separate who we are from what we do. And that's where I struggle with the idea of work-life balance, because in reality, who we are, which I call life, you know, your creativity, your knowledge, your wisdom, what I call life, cannot be separated from what we do or what our work is. So when we come to work, when we do our work, when we become productive and excited, and when we become creative, interacting with people, that's who we are. We're bringing who we are, what I call life, into our work and what we do. You can't really separate that. And the problem with the idea of work-life balance is we started compartmentalizing what we do from who we are. And that's where the real struggle comes in. Because at the end of the day, when you go to work, you bring with you all of your experiences, your emotions, your mindset, again, your creativity, your intellect, your wisdom, all of that of who you are. You bring that to work. And while for a couple of decades after the Industrial Revolution, the goal, and this has always been what we've heard, you know, probably from HR managers, your boss, or the goal is to be, or the goal is to attain work-life balance. And again, there's a lot of resources and articles written on the concept, but is I did propose let's not attain work-life balance, or our goal should not be work-life balance, but rather balance in general. The idea is to integrate the wholeness of who we are with what we do. Not trying to separate work from life, not trying to separate who we are with what we do, but rather bringing who we are and the wholeness of who we are with what we do. And that's where I start off, or rather I introduced the concept of the P.D.A principle, and that picture is actually the very first personal digital assistant that I had back in 2006. It's an O2 gadget. But the idea being is I got this idea from me going to work. I used to be working as a data center engineer for a large Japanese company, where I was on my way to work on the bus, looking at my P.D.A, and still thinking about how do I really make this work. And I started understanding and studying the lifestyles of people who are productive while maintaining less stress. And as I was tinkering with my P.D.A, it hit me. These three letters represent the key principles. Number one is prioritize. You got to understand that there are things that matter to you, and I highlighted you, not me, not your boss, not your manager, not the business, but identify the things that matter to you. There's nobody who can tell you that except you. And you also need to understand that we're all in different phases of life. I've already mentioned that. Some of you may be starting off, you're fresh out of college, or you're maybe a year or two or three in the workforce and you want to build your career, but we're all in different phases of life. Some of you may have like little kids, toddlers, or some of you may have high school or college kids. Some of you are on your way to retirement. But understand the fact that we are all in different phases of your life, which means, what might work for me might necessarily not work for you, or what might work for your boss might not necessarily work for you. I mean, I kind of hear people saying, well, been there, done that. True, been there, done that works in most cases, but understand, been there, done that works for you. And your situation might not be the same as mine. Although there are principles and experiences that you've learned from your phase of life that may apply to me, but not necessarily exactly. And so we need to understand that we're all in different phases of life, and allow your current phase of life to guide your priorities. Like I said, maybe you're a newly married individual and you want to have kids within the next 5 or 10 years, or maybe within the next year. Let that phase define your priorities. Or maybe your kids are now in high school and you're getting ready for college. Let that guide, or let that phase guide your priority. You want to focus on, what do I want to be at the moment? Do I want to be spending more time at work? Or do I want to be spending more time at home? I've heard people giving up works and jobs that pay really good salaries just because of the fact that they wanted to spend more time with their family. But understand that let the phase of your life guide how you define your priorities. And like I said, I can't do that for you. Your boss is not supposed to be defining your priorities for you, because you alone understand where you are at your phase, at this phase of your life, and let that guide your priorities. Oh, and by the way, enjoy every moment of it. Every single moment of it. Don't let it pass without enjoying every single moment of it. I know it's kind of interesting when people say, well, this is becoming annoying, I'm stressed out. How do I get to enjoy that? I remember this time when my kids were like 3 or 4 years old, or even 2 years old, when I have to do a lot of tasks and chores that have to do with my kids. At some point, I kind of get annoyed by the fact that I'm spending so much time preparing baby food and preparing for them to go to school that I don't get to do what I'm supposed to do. But the idea is that's the phase that I was in at that point in time. Totally forgot how to enjoy it. To the point where now I'm seeing my kids grow. And so I've made a decision to always enjoy every moment of it. And again, you could be on your way to your next promotion. You got to understand how all of these work and let your phase define what your priorities are. The letter D is for discipline. Develop daily habits that support your priorities. Now understand I highlighted the word priorities because defining your priorities come first. And then once you know your priorities, you start creating habits, scheduling those habits, making it a daily discipline. And put your priorities in your calendar and try to stick to it. Which means, well, I know for a fact my family is my priority. I put schedules in my calendar to highlight, if this is Mother's Day or my birthday or someone else's birthday in my family or our wedding anniversary. A lot of those things I put in my calendar. And I know part of my priority is to enjoy life and make sure that I get to enjoy life with my family. So I put my vacation days in my calendar as well and try to stick to it. And there's a reason I say try to stick to it, because in reality, life happens to us. I recently started going independent and running my own business, and part of that is a change of face in my life from a consultant before to now a business owner and doing marketing, sales, consulting, training, and all of that. But then my ideal schedule doesn't always happen. But the one thing that I've learned is don't beat yourself to death because of the fact that you didn't make your schedule for the day. I kind of look at it in terms of, well, there's a reason it's called discipline. I failed the first day. I got to wake up the next day thinking about my calendar and my schedule. And it might be frustrating, but I need to keep up and still do it. And do it. And there are things that we can't control, even though you put exactly what you want to happen in your calendar. Life just happens. We need to take somebody to the hospital, or maybe we need to go to, I don't know, maybe a child's recital, or maybe you want to play football in the afternoon, or, things happen. Your ideal schedule is a guideline on how you want your day to look like. But understand when things happen, when life happens, let's not become frustrated with the fact that it may or may not fall into place. But never forget the fact that we need to discipline ourselves to put your priorities in your calendar. The A is for the word accept. Understanding that and acknowledging that we can't do it all. I kind of like the picture that I use here. It was a picture of my son's hand working, and we were on the beach one New Year's morning, and they were trying to build a sand castle. And what I keep telling them is, look, you can have all the sand you want on the beach, but there's only so much you can do. Acknowledging and accepting the fact that we can't do it all is something that we IT professionals struggle with in most cases because, well, you got to think of it this way. I'm given the responsibility to take care of my databases. Oh, and by the way, and this is something that I love to do whenever I talk about availability groups in SQL Server 2012 and higher, well, guess what? Your work as a DBA has now changed. You're now dependent on Active Directory, on your DNS. But let's face it, how many people out there can actually do everything? I'm Asian, and so Asians are generalists. That's just who we are, and we kind of learn a lot of different things, but in the process of learning so many things, we kind of lose the bigger picture, and we fail to specialize. And when I understood the fact that I'm a generalist, and I know that's a key strength, I also understood that if I want to stick to that approach and become a generalist, I know I'm not going to be an expert. And so I decided later on that a friend of mine, actually one of my band mates back then, told me a very important quote: be a jack of all trades, but a master of one, which means you need to understand what you need to be an expert on, but realize that you can't be an expert on everything. And so acceptance of our limitations and acknowledging that we can't do it all, it's not a sign of weakness. And it's very empowering for me knowing that, hey, I can't do X, Y, and Z. I can't do this and I can't do that. And at some point it's somehow demeaning, somehow it's discouraging knowing that I can't do it all. I mean, realizing the fact that there's a lot of things that my wife can't do that I can do, and vice versa. But accepting our limitations, what we can and cannot do, accepting our boundaries is really not a sign of weakness. It's rather a declaration of confidence. Because I know if I said no to something, because I know I can't do it, I'm confident enough to let you know that if I need to do what only I can do, I can give you the best there is, and we're all going to be happy. It's also an understanding and a declaration of confidence, because I know that if if I can't do something, and if I'm limited to, let's say, X, Y, and Z, I know that I can constantly improve on becoming really, really, really good at X, Y, and Z. It also makes me dependent on someone else. And when I'm dependent on someone else, I know for a fact that it builds relationships, it builds trust. And part of that is really understanding all of these aspects in life. So prioritize, discipline, and accept. And that's where the whole P.D.A. concept, the whole P.D.A. principle come into the picture. But that's just a starting point. That's just how we start working with what we have and realizing that in order to really attain balance, we need to understand what our priorities are. We need to discipline ourselves according to our priorities and accept that we cannot do everything, but rather work with what we have and start moving forward. I kind of look at the different phases of our lives as, destinations. And as we go and move to our next destination, whether you're a young individual working towards that promotion, or a senior DBA working towards becoming a consultant, or maybe you're a manager, thinking about, raising a family, or maybe doing more volunteer work, you got to understand that there's different phases of life. And I keep saying different phases because, again, only you know which phase you're in right now, and only you can make that decision as to what to prioritize. And as we move through the different phases of our lives, we need a better path to get to our next destination. Not a new system, not a new checklist. I only highlighted prioritize and listing down all the things that matter to us as a guidepost. But we don't need 10 more things to accomplish. We don't need a new system to get more things done. But what we need is a new mindset, a better path to get to the next phase of our lives. And so I want to challenge you. Imagine looking at your life like this wheel. I started off with identifying some of the challenges that we face as IT professionals. Spending more time at work, wanting to spend more time with our family, struggling with keeping physically fit, and having having ourselves grounded with our spiritual aspects. Imagine looking at our life like this wheel, where each section of the wheel represents the different aspects of our lives. Intellectual. This is what we normally address when we go to work. You know, you kind of learn new skills, and as you learn new skills, you apply those skills at work. You become better at what you do. And part of that, of course, is not just the intellectual aspects of constantly learning, but part of that is finance, because as you increase your knowledge, as you develop more skills, of course, your financial status increases as well. The more skills that you have, the more valuable you are in your company. Unfortunately, most of us IT professionals spend so much time on this without focusing on the emotional side. That's where your friends and family come in, the people that matter to you, your connections, the SQL community. I find that it meets our emotional need, not just our intellectual need or intellectual aspect. You spend time investing time, talent, and resources into the emotional aspects of your lives. Yesterday, I posted a message on a SQL Family Facebook page about, please, if you see anybody who's a member of the SQL Server community, just give them a hug. It meets our emotional need, and at the same time, it meets someone else's emotional need. And then there's the spiritual aspect. We're spiritual human beings, whether you like it or not. Again, spiritual does not necessarily mean religious. You take a step back and look at what has happened for the past 5 or 10 years, and what do I envision happening within the next 5 or 10 years? We go back to the roots of who we are and what we are, and understanding who we are, and how what we do impacts others. And then there's this physical aspect, being physically fit, spending not just an entire day sitting. Of course, that's the irony and the risk of being an IT professional. In fact, if you look at some of the studies nowadays, one of the riskiest job in this generation happened to be a computer professional, because you spend more than 8 hours at some point, more than 8 hours a day sitting down. And how do you deal with that? And so the goal, as I mentioned, is not work-life balance, but rather balance in general. I mean, think of it this way. If this wheel represents maybe a tire in a bicycle, and I've gotten this idea from Zig Ziglar where you kind of look at it in terms of the different aspects of your life, what if you spend more time on the intellectual aspect and not spend so much time on the emotional, the physical, and the spiritual aspect? What do you think would happen when you start spinning the wheel? It becomes out of balance. And the same thing goes with, what if I spend so much time on the physical aspect versus the emotional aspect? I kind of heard of a story of one guy who was spending so much time at work and he's not being physically fit, and he once asked the question, well, I'm spending so much time at work, I need to be physically fit. I just sign up for the gym. Signing up for the gym does not make you balance. It just makes you more fit. And it doesn't solve the problem of being balanced. The idea here is to maintain balance on all of the aspects of our lives. The intellectual, the emotional, spiritual, and the physical aspects. On my blog, I actually wrote down a couple of the disciplines that I do in order to keep this balance. And as I mentioned, it's an ideal goal. I don't meet it every day, but I strive to make sure that I meet those goals on a personal basis. In maintaining the balance on all of those aspects, not work and life, but rather work incorporated with our lives. What's really interesting, though, is when you start incorporating, the emotional aspects with the intellectual aspects and physical aspects and spiritual aspects in what you do, things become a bit more balanced. And when you look at this, you kind of understand why a lot of these great companies, like Zappos, for example, or Shopify, a company that is based out here in Ottawa, where you kind of look at their culture and why they're striving, why they're growing, because the idea is their goal is to be healthy, and healthy individuals, healthy organizations grow as a side effect. And so they're incorporating emotional aspects with the intellectual aspects. Their programmers are constantly doing team building exercises to build their relationships, and in the process, they grow as a team, incorporating physical. And taking that down to the individual lives, where I want to incorporate my emotional, my intellectual aspect with my spiritual, my physical aspects, where balance is attained. I want to end on this note by using a quote that I use in a lot of my high availability and disaster recovery presentations, where at the end of the day, you got to plan not just how things happen in your life, but how you want things to happen in your life. Because failing to plan is planning to fail. And the sad part of it is, if we don't plan how we get balance out of our lives, somebody else will. Your manager might have a different plan for you, or your supervisor, or your team lead, or your friend. They might have really good intentions about how they want their lives and your lives to be integrated with it. We need to constantly plan and follow the plan, and it's a constant rebalancing of how we live our lives. And at the end of the day, if we don't plan, somebody else will. And it might not be the exact same thing as how we want it to be. The goal is balance. Integrating who we are with what we do, and understanding that in order to achieve balance, we have to work hard at it. I'd like to end on a note where, imagine riding a bicycle. If you're riding a bicycle, the only way to keep moving is to maintain balance. But as you keep moving and as you maintain balance, there's a struggle. A struggle not to fall down, a struggle not to be off balance. Which means in order to strive for balance, you have to constantly work out being in balance. I want to spend the next couple of minutes answering questions. If you may have questions, feel free to post them on the chat window. I'll be more than happy to answer those questions for you. And again, send an email. Feel free to do so.
Hi, Edwin. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Excellent, excellent. So great session. I kind of was nodding like a maniac in the background at most of what you were talking about there, especially the long hours. Seem to do a lot of those at the moment, and they always seem to be long hours, and never short hours for some reason. So we're waiting to see if any questions come through. So at the moment, I've seen one just kind of popping out. I was going to kind of read these out to you now, so we can kind of take those through. So let me just bring up my question pane. I just need to. So the question is how to start a planning process. So if you can maybe kind of address that one.
Great question. How do you start a planning process? There's a lot of literature out there about how you plan, how you do this, and how you do that. It's kind of sometimes overwhelming as to where to start off with. I got started way back when I was a kid. I know for a fact what I wanted to do. In fact, I wanted to be a pilot, but then my dad didn't like the idea of me being a pilot. So I thought, well, I wanted to be a consultant. And that's how I ended up being a consultant. But it's not always an easy path. And as like I said, I just recently started my own business, and I started thinking about, well, wait a second, life has been teaching me a lot for the past couple of years that I've been doing this. So I started planning. I love planning. It's just that Sometimes we have a good idea in mind, sometimes we have a great idea in mind about the ideal life that we always wanted. But then it's a different mindset to ask yourself, what has life been telling me all along? And so I realized I love teaching. I love to teach. In fact, I look forward to the day when I could teach in a university and not have to worry about anything. What I realized is that I took stock of what happened for the past 35 years. And I realized, number one, indeed, I love teaching. I mean, I started off as an 8-year-old teaching other kids, being just not just playing, but teaching how to do this and how to do that. When I was in high school, I was doing the exact same thing. And not only that, part of the process is understanding that, I was actually selling something. I didn't realize I was a salesperson. I hated doing sales. At the back of my mind, I keep thinking, no, I'm not a sales guy. I'm an engineer. I'm a consultant. I'm a geek. And so I am so not going to pursue selling. In fact, I turned down a very big offer right after university to work for a large oil and gas company because they wanted me to be a sales engineer, but I was wrong. And so I took stock of everything that happened to me in the past, and all the while, my life has been teaching me and telling me how to approach the next phase of my life. And so if you want to start planning, I would recommend take stock of what happened to your life for the past couple of years. Things may be good, things may be bad, but life is teaching us a lot of different things that leads us to what I call our destiny and our calling. And I'm actually reading a book called The Art of Work that highlights that process. And that's where I started thinking about, right, all I needed to do was to take stock of everything that happened in the previous life, previous years, my past 35 years. So yeah.
Excellent, thank you. I've got a couple more questions that have come through onto the list, so let's take the next one. So the next question is, for times like a few years ago when the economy was bad, and I think that probably applies now as well, and you felt stressed out, what could you do? So maybe some advice around that, Edwin.
Yeah, that's a great question. Just to tell you a bit of a story on how I had to deal with that. It's all about taking risks. Really, really big, illogical risks. And I totally understand that not a lot of people are into that. But again, that's where the spiritual aspect of your life comes into the picture. We moved to Singapore back in 2005 with $250 in our pocket. No hotel, no friends, no family, nothing. And everyone who actually knew about my plan was telling me, are you crazy? And I told them how much I'll be making back in 2005. You know what? That's what I was making back in 2001. And you're crazy to just take that step. And I told them, I just have to do it. I just have to do it. I got a job offer up here in Canada in 2008. This was the same year that the global economic crisis came out. I had a stable job at this large Japanese financial company. I've been doing really well. And all of a sudden, people are, again, laughing at me because I'm taking my entire family and moving them into an unknown territory. Again, no family, no friends, no relatives, nothing, with $2,000 in our pocket. Thinking, it's a global economic crisis. Are we going to move? Are we not going to move? We're liking Singapore. It's stable, it's secure, and this and that. But again, it's taking risks. And most people would say, that's ridiculous. That's crazy. And again, that's where one of the reasons why I highlighted why you really have to pay attention to the spiritual aspect of life, because taking that risk is a leap of faith. The next thing we know, everything starts falling into place. In the global economic crisis, where people are all concerned about how are we going to make it, it just gets you in a constant cycle of thinking about what if, and it's stressful. Totally understand. And I was in the same situation almost 3 months ago when I started my business. I don't have a market here in Canada. I don't know this and I don't know that. How do I do this? But it's all about taking risk, and part of that is that's why you need to build your spiritual strength. You can handle those stress and risks as you're moving along.
Cool. So I have another question. We've actually got, I think, 4 more. So we'll probably have to kind of try and run through these, but 4 or 5 more before the end of the session. So the next question I've got is, the thing I am struggling with as I get older, I feel I need to learn more to compensate for my age. Is this a common fear for IT professionals? And it says here, I'm not good at learning new things as I'm getting older. I kind of put my hand up and say it's more of a struggle. And it seems we have to learn faster and quicker and change your paces, all that kind of stuff. So if you can maybe kind of answer that one as well, Edwin.
I like the question really a lot, because it's something that I get to face with every time I talk to people. And here's what I like about it. I heard this quote once where it says, you can't teach old dog new tricks, and I'm pretty sure you've heard that a lot of times. In which I add on to, we're not dogs. We're humans. We're capable of learning new things. And so when you step into like the 45s, the 50s, or the 60s, you kind of think of it in terms of, well, I'm old, nobody's going to hire me, and that's where the age scare comes in. And start being stressful about the fact I can't learn. Well, first and foremost, you need to have a mindset of, well, I can. It's just a matter of whether or not I want to. And so, there's a lot of new technologies coming out. SQL Server 2016 is coming out. Windows Server VNext is coming out. Power View, Power BI, and the cloud. And all. And that's where you got to take the A word as part of the P.D.A principle. Accept what you can and cannot do. But when you do accept what you can do, you start charging towards it. And you know what? The beauty of people who are in that age bracket, people who are about 45 now, I do consider myself almost in that range, is that you have the benefit of experience. Some of the people do not have the luxury of until they end up being in that age. I kind of remember the time when I started working with Visual C# back in 2005, when I tell people, well, look at it this way. New people coming into the workforce know how to drag and drop to create a very nice web form, but people who have been in this industry long enough know how that thing works versus how to make it work. And again, as somebody who's going to get into that age range, you have the benefit of experience, of wisdom that the younger generation would have. And people would pay to have that experience, knowledge, and wisdom because it brings value to the table.
So I've got a couple more here for you. Actually, they seem to keep adding to the list here. So the next one I'm going to get for you to answer is, let me just get the scrolly bar to go in the right direction. So how did unplanned things change your plans in the past, and how much value do you put in external influences that may affect your plans? So there's another quick one. We might need to shorten the answers here because we're kind of got a few more to do and running out of time. So you want to go with that one, Edwin? Go ahead.
Sure. There's always something that's going to happen. There's always external things that are going to happen. But the thing is this: if you have a plan, at least you know what your fallback is if things don't go well. Now, that's where your priorities come in. I know that I can put in my priorities in my calendar, but then you got to think about it. If something happens unexpected, first question you need to ask is that part of my priority? If it isn't, then I know for the fact that I don't have to deal with it. Did I say yes to it? Did I say no to it? And there's this quadrants that Stephen Covey called the urgent but urgent important. You classify everything in terms of urgent, important, urgent, not urgent but important, and not urgent and not important. Everything that you have to deal with on a daily basis has to fall into one of those four categories. And again, you don't just look at the short term. You got to look at the long term in terms of, is this thing coming in that's going to break my entire schedule for today? Is that going to be an urgent, or is that going to be an important item? And then you classify according to that, and then you respond based on your priorities, and accepting, of course, the fact that you can't deal with everything.
Cool. So I've got another one here for you. So I think we all come across this one from time to time. How do you resolve a situation where you need to choose between two options that have the same priority for yourself? So what's your strategy for that one?
We almost always have that. You got to think of it in terms of, well, I can't compare family and work, because at the end of the day, I'll still choose family over work regardless. And it almost always goes back to priorities and maybe getting promoted versus not getting promoted. I've turned down a lot of promotions in the past, primarily because they don't line up with what I believe in, and they don't line up with my priorities. There was a time when I was being promoted to be a lead with a promise of a pay raise and all that, and I told them, no, I can't, because it doesn't fall into what I believe in. And again, going back to building the spiritual aspect and your emotional aspect and your intellectual aspect, is now it becomes easier to answer those questions given the fact that they're work related, right? Again, going back to the family, am I going to prioritize my wife over my kids? If at the end of the day, it's how we see ourselves and how we understand what a role is. And I keep telling my kids, look, you're not the priority. My wife is my priority because she came in first before you. And making that distinction, and most kids don't want to hear that, but then we constantly tell them, look, we love you guys, but understand the fact that our utmost priority is this, 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 and this.
Excellent. So I've got another one here. So I've also seen a lot of successful operations people not good at interacting or keeping their marriages intact. After a time, your wife can take so much of that 24/7 work life. What's your advice to get out of that work life cycle and maintain a happy work life? I'll kind of bring that down a little bit from what it was. Some advice on that one?
It's challenging, especially in this day and age where you're working with people in different time zones, and people are starting to deal with people in the North American time zone and the European time zone. And if you're a manager who has to deal with people in different time zones, well, you got to find something that you could agree upon in terms of work and life, and that's where you start delegating. And most people, especially in the IT industry, most people don't like delegating because they don't feel in control when they're delegating. That's where the trust issues come in. And that's, again, one reason why you need to build the emotional aspect of your life. I remember the time when I had to deal with people on my DBA team who are from different geographical locations and different time zones. I try to spend even 5 or 10 minutes every other day just talking to them and not dealing with any work-related issues. I ask how their dog is doing, how their life is doing, how's their kid doing. Nothing to do with work, because now I'm giving them the opportunity to trust me and for me to trust them, so that when I start delegating, they feel privileged. They feel entitled to the fact that they can now do things that I can't do, and it empowers them. And so when I do that, I break the cycle of having to constantly monitor what they're doing and having to constantly be there, because now I've empowered them to do some of the things that I could do, which leaves me some time to take a step back and do the things that only I could do.
Cool. So the final question we have is, need to decide if I should stay professional or go back to a more managerial position. In order to advance at the specific company and be a decision maker, need to be a manager, but like being a techie too. So advice maybe around, or some insights onto that one.
I had a question like that yesterday from one of my former managers. In fact, it's a question that my friend in high school started asking almost 15 or 16 years ago. We were both Oracle DBAs, and he was asking questions about this. And one of the reasons why he didn't want to be a manager, because he's going to get, totally disconnected from the technical side. And I told him, you got to make that choice. But understand this, you can have both. It's just a matter of what you choose to be. And like I said, I've been doing sales and marketing for the past 3 months. Does that mean I'm more well-versed in sales? No, not at all. But I have to understand that if I want to be really, really good at what I do, database availability, corruption, and disaster recovery, I need to focus on really doing this on a regular basis. But understand that when you move towards a managerial role, your goals and your priorities will change. It's not going to be to fix that corruption issue or bring up that server that's been down for like 5 hours. That is not going to be your goal and your priority. And that's why you need to start, delegating and trusting people and making sure that they can do what you can do. And that's where the mentoring comes in. That's why we do these things. Virtual chapters, because we want to empower you to empower others so that you can reclaim your life back and have that balance.
Excellent answers as well there for all the questions we had come through. So Edwin, that's the final question that's now been answered, and we're top of the hour, so we've kind of we've done good. We've managed to finish on time, which is unusual for my sessions, I think. So I do thank you very much for your insightful session on that work life, or the myth of the work-life balance. There's plenty I'm going to take away from this session. If you have questions, I'm sure that we can pass those on to Edwin. The recording for this session, if you want to go back and see what Edwin was talking about and kind of pick up some stuff, that's going to be up on the website in a couple of hours. I'm just going to get that posted up as soon as I can. And I'd like to thank you all for attending today, and hopefully you'll be able to attend some of our future events. We've got some organized for June and July, and they'll be posted soon on the website, and we look forward to seeing you at those again. Edwin, once again, thank you very much for joining us today and for your brilliant session. Thanks.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. I really love doing this.
Pleasure. Thank you, everyone.